Welcome to this edition of Rainer on Leadership. My name is Thom Rainer, and I am the founder and CEO of Church Answers, always joined by Sam Rainer, the president of Church Answers, and in the production area, who never shows herself, does not really want to, but she's starting to show herself more in webinars, is Amy Jordan in Richmond. And she is being assisted by Akeem Abdul-Morella today. Good to see him in the production area right over there in Richmond as well. I don't know what he's doing in town there, but he's obviously working with some of them as well, Amy as well. We're going to be talking about 5 considerations before you leave your church. A lot of people, the great resignation is taking place. A lot of people who have not resigned are thinking about resigning, not only in the church, but in other places as well. And we're going to talk about that. But first, make certain that before you leave your church that you have a good degree. How'd you like that for a segue? You get that at Southeastern Seminaries, committed to helping you get the training you need to pursue ministry from any part of the world. And if you apply for any of their degrees and you write in Church Answers, no spaces, just Church Answers, they'll waive your application fee. They have an incredible online presence, a lot of degrees that are online. My personal favorite is the MA in Church Revitalization. Can be completed pretty close to a year if you want to do that, all online. It's an incredible degree. That's been in partnership with us, but they have a lot of other degrees as well. So
I highly recommend that MA in Church Revitalization.
I totally agree. So we got a number of pastors who are leaving their churches, a number of pastors and staff who are considering leaving their churches. It is not up to Sam or Thom to judge the heart or the motive of what the Holy Spirit is doing, but we do think, based upon what we're seeing, that we could offer a little bit of input that can help frame it better as you attempt to make this type of decision. And it used to be, this is kind of a Rainer episode, in not only Sam and me being here, but me saying this, it used to be that every year I would hear of a Rainer son getting a moving van ready to go to another town. And, it's just one after another. And now all of them have been at their current place of ministry at least 6 years. At least.
Yeah, I'm in year 7. So let's explain this a little bit. We were in our 20s and early 30s, and that's what happens is you move around a little bit.
Yeah. They were very mobile. They were very restless, regardless of what age it was. But now, gosh, y'all, you've been at West Bradenton and Church Answers you're in year 7 with the church.
Yes, year 7 at the church, and it's been such a long journey. I have no idea when I started at Church Answers. It feels like forever.
Really, you started with the Rainer group when you were a teenager, or even 15.
Yeah, if we're going to go all the way back, 99 would be my start date, and you started in 89 or 88. 88 or 89 is when you started.
It was 88, but that's close enough. No, it was 88 when I started Church Growth Visions. Terrible name. Terrible name. I got rid of it right quickly. We want to talk about some things that you may want to consider before you leave the church. And this is particularly applicable in this hopefully post-COVID world. It's certainly a post-quarantine world for most people now. And the first of these is, don't make a decision based on weariness. Don't make a decision based upon decision fatigue. Sam, before I got on this on this podcast, I was on a phone call, and it was with a pastor who just said, I am ready to leave. And I could hear the weariness in his voice. I could just tell that he was physically, emotionally, and spiritually weary. Quite frankly, I'm old, and I've been around a long time, and I've seen a lot of phases. I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah, I hear it, and I see it, and I feel it myself. I think pastors historically, last 30, 40, 50 years, have always had days where they feel like, okay, this is it. But I think those days are more frequent now. I think that the impact of the pandemic and decision fatigue and just polarization in the culture has caused people to consider that moment where you're like, I'm ready to give up. I think pastors are having more of those now. We've always had them in the past. But I think that they're more frequent now, and that's taxing. That's taxing on the psyche.
Well, this pastor told me that every day feels like Monday.
There you go. I mean, I think that's a good way to describe it.
And that is what they are going through. Absolutely. So don't make a decision based on weariness or decision fatigue. And by the way, I welcomed all of our podcast listeners. We've got Amy's been telling us how the podcast has been growing, but the YouTube video cast is growing as well. So got to welcome those who are looking at us too. Yeah. And Sam, I was glad to see as that happened, your connectivity just went from a 1 to a 5. So keep waving your hand.
Okay, so all right, listen. I was waving at our YouTube audience for those who are listening and not seeing. I was waving, and two, all of you pastors out there, you understand church internet. It's just one of those days. All right, I'm hardwired in. I don't know what's going on. And my executive pastor is busy right now, and he's got more important things to worry about.
Yeah, Tim does a lot. Does a lot. But don't if it's weariness or decision fatigue, give it a while. Now, a while may be another month, but just ask yourself the question: can I last one more month and see what happens in a month? Just give it a while. And secondly, just because your church is in decline doesn't mean you need to leave. If that is the case, about 90% of pastors would be leaving today.
Yeah, and I think this has a bigger impact than we realize. I believe that everyone knows in their head that churches are smaller on the other side of the pandemic, generally speaking, and it's the vast majority of them. 90% is the number you just threw out there. It's somewhere in that range. Very few churches are growing now, in terms of growing past where they were pre-pandemic. Some have dipped and they're ticking back up, but there's not many churches that are larger post-pandemic than they were pre-pandemic.
That's exactly right.
And I think we all know that in our head. I think just about every researcher, every commentator, people like us, everyone's saying that. But it's different. It's different when you feel it on a Wednesday night or a Saturday night or a Sunday morning, whenever you have your gatherings and the people just aren't showing up. And that's what brings you down. In your head, well, this is everybody. And you take some semblance of consolation in that. But it's in the heart where you feel like a failure. You feel like we shouldn't be here. You feel like, that people are letting you down. Even though none of those things are true, you still feel it. And I think that this smaller church size for most churches is really wearing. It's taxing on pastors, probably more than they realize.
You haven't been at this level before or in a long time.
Right.
It's pushed you back either several years or you haven't been there at this church.
Yeah, and a lot of pastors did a lot of good work to grow the church, only to see it get erased in just a few short months.
That is just so frustrating. It is. I get it. We are grateful to Brad Wagner, who really introduced us to the principle of the push and the pull. We're going to add the pray to that. The push means, do you have a reason to leave? That's
PRAY.
Yes, PRAY.
Push, pull, pray.
Thank you for doing that. It's in the show notes, but we don't want PREY.
Push, pull,
right.
That has a completely different connotation.
Yes. Push means that you sense that God is leading you away from something. Pull is God is leading you to something. Pray means you're listening to God about those two somethings. And it's not a perfect formula. I mean, sometimes you leave just because of a push. Sometimes you leave just because of a pull if you've prayed through these. But usually God works in both where you are now and where you will be. And so there's usually a push and a pull if you're in a prayerful situation. So check all three of those.
Yeah, and I've heard of people moving to something because the pull was just so enormous. Like it was just this big thing that came out of the blue, and I know that God is leading me here, even though they didn't have a big push factor. I would caution anybody that has all push, no pull, though.
That's a good point.
Sometimes big things come up and it's just like, whoa, wasn't even anticipating this. God's taking us here. It was just something big. That's the pull. But if there's no real pull and it's all push, I guess it's possible that it's time to leave, but that means you're quitting and you got nowhere to go. And that's almost always an unhealthy thing for you, your family, your church. There's a lot of wisdom in making sure you have something lined up elsewhere first before you just quit.
And we know of a number of situations where someone has quit without a place to go. And it most of the time, it's not a pretty situation when they get on the other side. It's financially struggling, it's ministerially struggling, it's emotionally struggling, and it's family taxing.
Yeah. And I think most of them would come back a year or 2 or 3 years later and say, I made a decision in an emotional state and I wasn't thinking clearly.
Yes, you've got that right.
If you feel that, like, I'm just ready to quit and you don't have something lined up, I certainly don't want to be the Holy Spirit for anybody. I would just say exercise extreme caution in just quitting without something else.
Exactly. The polarization of people and workload of ministry are not going to likely be better at another church. Again, a conversation with another pastor. His church is an anomaly in that it has grown beyond where they were in 2019. I rarely hear that, but this pastor's church has grown beyond where it was in 2019. And so I asked the pastor, I said, man, you've held on to everybody. He said, no, I haven't. He said, we have lost a ton of people. He's in a high demographic growth area as well. He said, but we've lost a ton of people. And most of them that left were because they thought we, or I, the pastor speaking, were on the wrong side of the debate about mask, about social distancing, about political candidates, name it on the list. He said, we had a group leave and they went to another church, most of them did, that had the position that was their position, their political position, their posturing position on mask and social distancing and all that. So even if you're in these good looking situations like this pastor is, this pastor said it was extremely painful because he went through some terrible losses as a result of all the polarization taking place.
Yeah, I certainly feel it. We tried to thread the needle here. We tried our best to balance. We tried our best to do what was best for the most people. And we still lost people at West Bradenton. We had extremes on either side. And people don't give the benefit of doubt to leaders much anymore.
That is well stated.
And they assume the worst even on things that are minor. And people have a lot of difficulty now prioritizing issues because everything is front and center. Everything is urgent. Everything is right now. Everything needs a statement. And
social media is pervasive.
Yeah. And, I say this as somebody who believes social media is more good than bad, but there is certainly a dark side to it. And the dark side is this level of urgency for everything. And people are they're not discerning much. You can see a very minor issue blow up and, almost the same kind of reaction for a major issue. And it's hard to lead people when there is a general lack of discernment in the culture. That's very hard. And I know that Dad, you've always said, don't just bring a problem, present a solution. But I think so I'm trying not to just raise an issue, but also present a solution. I think the solution is that sometimes silence is the best answer. Sometimes you don't need to respond to everything, particularly if you're not an expert in that area. So foreign policy is not something that you're an expert on. Maybe you shouldn't make a statement on that particular part of the world that's going through that particular thing that everyone wants you to say something about. You just learned where the country was on the map. So maybe you're not the best person to be speaking into that issue. So I think silence is a good answer. Sometimes you'll be forced to say things in a polarized society and people will just want to know where you stand. But I would say don't be afraid to pause, wait, be silent, give it a day, 2, 3, a week, and you might find that your lack of a statement was the best statement to make.
I know that this particular podcast is a serious topic, and I'm trying to acknowledge the sobriety of it, but that 60s song just keeps coming to my head. Silence is golden. You remember that song?
No.
No, no. I think it was the Tremolos, but I'm not going to hold fast to that. But I think it was the Tremolos. But I'm not going to sing it, Sam, because we got. Oh, Amy just gave me the thumbs up. It is the Tremolos.
Now, see, here's the thing. Amy and I are of the same generation. And unfortunately, she is going to defend you on the 60s music. But I know you started the show and I just came along for the ride. How come I don't get to quiz people on 90s music? I mean,
I've
why?
never, I've never stopped you. Have you seen a stop sign go up and say no 90s at this site?
I think that most people are about as uninterested in that as they can possibly be. So I will hold off.
I just have songs in my head and they start leaking out my ears, and I will wait to sing Silence is Golden after the podcast. And anyway, the meaning of the song has nothing to do with what we're talking about. It's about a man in love with a woman who's in love with another man. That other man is cheating. The man who's in love with her sees it and he wants to tell her, but he decides he cannot. So silence is golden.
That sounds like one of my counseling sessions.
Well, it sounds like a country song, but it's a 60s song as well. Here in Nashville, we could do something with that song. Okay, back to seriousness. There's this polarization taking place. I probably just created a lot of polarization with my foray into the 60s right there. But it's not necessarily better anywhere else. So the green grass syndrome may not be the path you need to take at this point.
Yeah, and I would say this. If your church has kind of settled and people are just okay, I mean, maybe you still hear things, but they're okay. You jumping to another church, it could stir up polarization there because people are going to want to know where you stand on things. So if you're trying to escape, just realize that in your escape, you may be jumping into even more polarization because your current church kind of knows where you are and they've kind of come to terms with that. But a new church is going to want to know all the answers, and you're going to be put in a place of having to answer all over again. And so you may be getting out of one fire and into an even worse fire.
In some sectors for many, many years, still to some degree, is still there. There was the polarization over Reformed and non-Reformed theology. And it got to a point that in many circles, you could not apply to a church or talk to a search committee or talk to an elder board without them asking you, where do you stand on this Reformed issue? And it's happening in these political and other issues as well.
Yeah, I would just say, again, caution. If you're looking to escape polarization, you probably aren't.
Nope.
If that's your one reason for leaving, you're probably just getting into another mess.
Yes. Well, I saw that William Shatner recently went into outer space, and he was it's the first time he's been in outer space. It's kind of really, really weird. But it was a quick trip, just a minute or so, and he's back. And one of the comments he made, he said, "Well, I'm back in the world where all the problems exist." Okay. You're back in the world where all the problems exist. This last one, this one is one that I believe, no, I know that I have failed at least on one occasion. And I think it is something that other pastors have not looked closely. And it's your family situation. Sometimes it is a legitimate reason to leave. And I'm thinking of a particular pastor. Both of you will probably remember the situation without me giving too much detail, but the situation was so toxic at his church that his wife and children left the church.
Yeah.
And yet he decided to stay, but he didn't get to stay very long.
No. Family is a legitimate reason. For some, they've lost a loved one and they need to move back closer to home to be with a mom or a dad, an aging mom or dad. For some, children are just not doing well and you know that they're going to do better in another place. For some, it's a spouse that just is struggling. Family first. It is a legitimate reason to move. Now, don't use your family. Don't make them the reason. But if they really are the reason, then absolutely, you have to manage your home. And part of managing your home is making sure that they're taken care of. And if it's not working in a particular place and you do believe that it will work better in another place, then that is a legitimate reason. And I know there are going to be some that disagree with us on this, Dad, but I'm going to stand firm. If you think that you can be better for your family, then that is a move you do need to make.
I'm with you on that because I am not batting 1,000 on that. We've been talking about 5 considerations before you leave your church. Look at the show notes. There's no need for me to reread them to you, but look at the show notes and see what's going on there. Look at the show notes to read about Southeastern. And I'm going to ask Amy to just add one other thing, let you speak to it, Sam. So many of these issues come up in our community at Church Answers, and that is one of the best resources. And I say that unashamedly. It sounds very promotional. I say that unashamedly. For $9.97 a month, it is one of the most unbelievable resources that I could think of anywhere. And you could be in a very safe place talking over these things with community members from day one.
Yeah, and I wish we would talk about this more, so maybe we should. At Church Answers, we call it our silver level subscription. So you can go to churchanswers.com. There's a little join button. You can click there and see more about it. But there's several things that you get at the silver level. But really, the core of silver is community. And we have what we call Church Answers Central, which is a community forum of pastors and church leaders, about 1,800 people. And, they are there communicating with each other. Monday morning is
It's heavy on Monday morning.
It's a heavy post day on Monday morning, and we know that. And there's a lot of things that you just need to vent, ask, get off your chest, talk about, seek wisdom, seek encouragement. It's a positive environment, an encouraging environment, and it's for pastors and church leaders. And we've got experts in there as well. We've got, people who are subject matter experts that chime in, but it's also just a community of pastors. So I'd encourage you to go check that out. Even if it's just a once a week thing where you're getting in there and just asking a question or giving somebody encouragement, it's really one of the best tools for pastors out there. We've got a massive archive of posts. So if you're even wondering about, I've got a particular question about some software program, there is probably an answer in there about that you can
just
search.
Put it in the search, and you'll see all kind of recommendations that come in. It's unbelievable. So we've got that link. So I mentioned you could go to churchanswers.com and join, but Amy's putting it also in the link. Here's the thing about it: if you're disappointed with it, which I've never heard anybody say, you get out at any time. There's
no contract.
Yeah, there's no contract. You get out at any time. All right, Sam, I know that this has been a sober topic, but it's a necessary topic, especially in these days in which we are. So just let our audience know that we thank them and tell them where they can continue to listen to us and watch us.
Yeah, certainly want to thank our audience. I want to thank everyone that's tuning in to this episode. Also want to thank our sponsor, Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. You can check them out at sebts.edu. And for all of you who are listening to us at Rainer on Leadership, be sure to watch on YouTube or subscribe on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app. You can also join us online at churchanswers.com, where we are growing healthy churches together.